Okay, here we go again. So you can get a better idea. So I've been working on a couple of pieces for this exhibit, and I wanted to do some crowns. But as I've mentioned earlier, I was having a rough week, and it was hard to get in. And I had sketched out everything. I sketch first, and then I was stuck. And so then I just painted the board over again, just painted the whole canvas back to the violet, and didn't know where to go. And then I thought, well, why don't I paint something that I really, really love, which is my daughter, Sarah Makiba, who's been one of my favorite muses. And I have on my laptop a lot of photos, reference photos that I've taken over the years of various people. Sometimes folk I just see on the street. I'll be like, excuse me, pardon me. I'm not weird, I'm an artist. Can I take your picture? And generally, if I ask them then, can I take your picture now? Generally, people will say yes. Now, if I say, here's my card, here's my number, call me, and I can take some pictures, generally I'll never hear from them. But the only time I've been able to do that is there was a woman I met at a concert. My husband and I had performed. She was in the audience. She'd come up, and I was like, okay, honey, I got to do. And she lived in another city, but I'd gotten her information. And then when I was in that city, I had contacted her, and she came, and we did a photo shoot, and I painted her with a collared crown a few years back. But anyway, yes, working on a collared crown, and this is my palette. I hope you can see this. It's a weird angle, so you're going to get like the back of my head a lot. And I know there's probably a better way to do this, but it's just me and my camera. But I'm using these violets, this wonderful warm raw sienna, and some yellow oxide, because that's just one of my favorite palettes, and brings out all the wonderful golden tones in my daughter's skin. So as I work today, and it's weird trying to be comfortable in this format, because so often I listen to books and things to keep my mind off of that critical thinking part of my brain, and also thinking, oh my God, they're judging me. Oh my God, if I only painted like, silly thoughts. Thoughts are crazy, man. Today, my thoughts, they were hard, my husband turned on the news. I don't turn on the news in the morning. There it was, more violence, more senseless stuff that it fed into the fears that I have. And one of the things those fears have done is keep me close to the house, so that I, who love to walk, would walk miles a day just out of joy, had stopped walking because I didn't feel safe, and I just didn't feel safe. I felt, all my fear and insecurity being out on the street. Who's looking at me? What are they thinking? Do they think I'm human? Will somebody hurt me? These are thoughts that were keeping me. Nope, that was wrong. So I may have to pay a little more attention here. But those were thoughts that were keeping me, they were immobilizing me. And this morning, I was like listening to my body. Which, your body is this entity. It's not just the thing that carries that. It's not like just the vessel that we're living in. It's, we're in our body, our mind, our spirit. We're all one thing here. And I have a tendency to treat my body like, it's less important. But I was having a lot of shoulder pain, and my body was like, you need to get out and get some circulation going. And I was like, oh, I've got to go out there. So I put on the Girl Trek podcast. They had started, I don't know if you guys know, in 2020, they had started these amazing walks where you could listen to the podcast and walk with them. And so I went all the way back to the beginning when they were doing these half-hour walks. And today I listened to the one about Georgia Gilmore, a woman in Montgomery, Alabama during the bus boycott, who used what she had. She was like, and they were like, you don't have to go get new training to do what it is. You've got your superpower. And hers was she could cook. So she would make fried chicken dinners and macaroni and collard, all that stuff. And she would sell dinners, and she funded a large portion of the resistance during the boycott. She provided transportation for so many women during the boycott using what she had, which is she could cook. And so she did, and that's what she did. And she said she didn't know how to drive before the boycott, but then she learned how to drive, and she saved a little money, and then she bought a car. And then I was a woman with a car. And I loved that. I loved that to remind me, and the question asked by the podcasters, and their names aren't coming to me now. I'm sorry, y'all. I listen to y'all all the time. I do. I love you. Was what is your superpower that you don't have to go out and get training for? What have you got now that you can use? And that resonated because that's something that sticks with me all the time. Use what you got. Everything you need, you have. And it's so easy to start thinking I don't have what I need in terms of like I don't have the money, I don't have the training, I don't have the. And I'm like, what? By now I'm 60. I got all kind of stuff. Sure, I would love to have lots of money. I don't have that yet. Or maybe I never will, but I have everything I need right now. I'm sitting here in this space, which Lord knows we paid for by drip and drab, and it is done. So, yay. And anyhow, I was listening to that and I was encouraged. And also sometimes when I'm feeling anxious and afraid walking, normally I don't advise, walking with sound canceling headphones because I like to know what's going on around me. But what I needed to do also was to stop the anxious thoughts. So listening to the podcast, not turned down enough so I hear people coming up and around, but cars, etc. I didn't hear the birds so much, but I had her telling me the story of Georgia Gilmore in my ears and listening to that and feeling encouraged, and I got a good walk in and my body is happy about that. And so now I will spend some time painting my amazing daughter, and I'll share how it looks with you. The other painting I was sharing when I was telling a story about, being the perfect parent. The reason you haven't seen it is because I paused. After I finished her hands, I had a different idea about how I wanted to work with that piece. So I set it aside and I began working on this one because it's for much sooner, an exhibit that's coming up much sooner. So, that one's going to wait because I've got a different idea. And also I had to test that idea out in something else, which I did. And it worked. I liked it. And then I had to get supplies, which I did. So I don't know how my superpower. No, that's not true. I was going to say, I don't know how my superpower will make the world better, but I absolutely do. My superpower is story and storytelling. I am gifted with that. I was born into a lineage of storytelling through my grandmother, and I don't know her lineage because we don't know her people, and we never found them. There was no Ancestry.com and things when she was living in the same way, though we did just shift off my mama's DNA. We just shipped it out. We might have family that we've never known because her mama was given away when she was a little girl. Okay, so I can tell you that story. My grandmother, Elizabeth Shields, who is one of the most favorite people in my world, she was a poet and she was a writer, and she would write songs and she would preach. And in the Adventist church, to have women preachers, that was not something that we really did. But my grandmother, she would exhort, and she just had this joy. Now her life was not easy. Her earliest memories about being 4 years old and her daddy taking her on a train from which county? North Carolina, not far from the South Carolina border, taking her on a train to Virginia and giving her to an old lady. She doesn't know who the old lady was. What she knows is that at some point the old lady called the police, and a policewoman came and got her and gave her to the woman I know as my great-grandmother, Sarah Louise Jackson, who she had known never had children and wanted some. And so Sarah Louise Jackson took this little girl whose name at the time was Josephine, we found it out and it'll come to me. But she took Josephine Scott and she changed her name to Elizabeth Josephine Jackson. This was not done legally. There were no papers. So, and that's who raised my grandmother, the woman I knew as my great grandmother, Sarah Louise. Now, if her daddy ever came, her daddy's name was Joseph Scott. We found out, she found census records, all these things. If he ever came back for her, he might not have known where to find her anyway. I did find later when I looked, I found a death certificate for Joseph Scott, and later for Joseph Scott Jr., born in the same county as my grandmother a few years after she was born. And I can only think his birth had something to do with her being given away. And I think later there was some news that maybe her mama had died when the son was born. And so, but she had some older sisters. She remembers that there were older girls, and the census, she found the census when she later went back, that had like 3 or 4 older girls in the house at that census. Never found the sisters, never found the family. We never tracked anybody down. I found a Social Security number for her father, which was applied for in Virginia. So maybe that's where he had been from. We don't know. Anyhow, my grandmother, she had a rough time. And she got pregnant young. She said she was so innocent. She didn't know what was going on. And she said it was the first time. And then he disappeared. He was a college student from a well-to-do Black family up in Connecticut. And she said, write the house and write her, tell him she was pregnant. He never responded to anything, and he let us know nothing. And so she did domestic work. And she just did the best she could as a teenager, pregnant with this very light-skinned baby. And she did domestic work. And my great-grandmother really raised my mama. And my mother tells me about how when my mother was 14 years old, my grandmother took my mama to Virginia Commonwealth University to a live taping of a radio show. And that the announcer came out on stage, and he had this rolling, articulation. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is," and my grandmother reached over to my mother and nudged her and said, "There's your daddy." And at the intermission, she took my mama backstage, and that my grandfather looked at her and said, "So who is this young lady?" Now my mama looks not like her mother. My mama looks like her daddy. And my grandma said, "This is your daughter, Shirley." And he did not deny it. He actually later came to the house where my great-grandmother treated him kindly, treated him very respectfully, which is interesting. Because what I knew of my great-grandmother, who helped raise me too, live with us, my great-grandmama, we was like, you should be scared of her. I loved her dearly. But she was like, no mess. She's not taking no mess. As a matter of fact, my brothers and I never believed in Santa Claus because we knew any old white man with a bag trying to get in our house at night, she wasn't going to be having it. So the fact that she treated him with respect. And so then my mother, she didn't really have much of a relationship with him until adult, but he did acknowledge her. At any rate, all I was that to say is that my grandmother somehow, despite a lot of stories I could tell about her, I won't, managed to just have this kind of joy, intentional decision-making about gratitude, just intentionally. And her Christianity was a big part of that. She embraced faith like a life raft. And she would sing, and she would exhort, and she would write songs, and she would play the organ. I have no idea how she learned to play the organ, but she would play the organ and sing. And that she taught my mother how to deliver her, speeches at school. And then that was passed to me so that I learned how to articulate and to speak in public from my mama through her mama. You weren't going to get up in church and do your piece if you did not do it properly. You had to know which words are quiet and which words are loud, all that stuff, which is somehow just like out my DNA and so much in me. And also, just because when I learned to read, I could hear all the voices and all the tones, and I think that was just passed right on down to me. So yes, all that to say, that's my superpower. That's my superpower. And I know story is magic, and I know story is powerful, and I use story however I can. And this is a really long, this is a long thing here. But I do miss story. I miss traveling, and I miss speaking on stages and sharing story because I know the transformational power of story. And I love what happens when people begin to connect through story, when people begin to recognize themselves and others in themselves, and how story opens the world up in that way. It helps us see ourselves, it helps us see others. I think that is my superpower. There are things I cannot do. I am not a politician, nor do I want to be. Uh, there are many things I cannot do, but I can tell a story, and I can listen to a story, and I can share the power of story. I can paint with story. So I was encouraged listening to the story of Georgia Gilmore, who used what her superpower was, which is how to throw down in the kitchen to make a really big difference. So I'm going to get back to my painting, which I realize I just have a hard time painting and sharing in this way, just because of my own critical mind. But you see what I'm working on. I have about an hour before I got to go in and take care of Mama. So I'm going to use it wisely. And you got this big old long thing to listen to, or not.